Happy day to all. Today, for class 10th, we are going to start chapter 16, Management of Natural Resources. Here we should see what are natural resources. So, earlier in class 9th, we have seen some natural resources like soil, air, and water, and how various components can be recycled over and over again in nature, how it is done naturally. So, in the previous chapter, we also learned about the pollution of these resources because of some of our activities. And today, in this chapter, we shall look at some of our resources and how we are using them. Maybe we should also think about how we ought to be using our resources so as to sustain the resources and conserve our environment. We shall be looking at our natural resources like forest, wildlife, water, coal, and petroleum and see what are the issues at stake in deciding how these resources are to be managed for sustainable development. So we often hear or read about environment problems. These are often global level problems and we feel helpless to make any changes. There are international laws and regulation, and then there are our own national laws and acts for environmental protection. There are also national and international organizations working towards protecting our environment. So, in this chapter, we are going to learn about those awareness about the problems caused by unthinkingly exploiting our resources has been a fairly recent phenomenon in our society, and once this awareness rises, some action is usually taken. And uh, we must have heard about the Ganga Action Plan. And this is a multi-crore project came about in 1985 because the quality of the water in the Ganga was very poor, like having coliform bacteria, which is a group of bacteria found in human intestine and whose presence in water indicates contamination of disease-causing microorganisms. So first and foremost, we will see what are these natural resources. So the natural resources are the resources available in nature like air, water, sunlight, soil, minerals, forest, wildlife, etc. And the natural resources are of two main types and they are renewable and non-renewable natural resources. First, we will see what are renewable natural resources. Those resources which can be replenished in a short period of time, like air, water, sunlight, forest, etc., we call them as renewable natural resources. And what are non renewable natural resources? Those resources which cannot be replenished in a short period of time, like minerals, we know coal, petroleum, natural gases, metals, etc., because they take millions of years to be formed. So the human activities produce a lot of waste material which are thrown away into the environment. And these waste cause pollution of natural resources like air, water, and soil. So here the picture also shows what are renewable resources and what are non-renewable energy. So next we should talk about when we need We need not feel powerless or overwhelmed by the scale of the problems because there are many things that can be done and make a difference by each and every individual. So earlier itself, you would have come across the three R's to save the environment, that is, reduce, recycle, and reuse. What do they refer to? We will have a look. So, the three R's to save the environment. The first one is the reduce, which means using less of natural resources and avoiding wastage of natural resources. And the second one forms the recycle, which means materials like paper, plastic, glass, metals, etc., used for making things can again be used for making new things instead of synthesizing or extracting new paper or plastic, glass, or metals. We call it as recycle. The third one is reuse, which means using things again and again, like when we use a plastic bottle in which we buy a jam or a pickle, it can be again used for storing things in the kitchen. So here the pictures also shows reduce, reuse as well as the recycle one. What is the need or why do we need to manage our resources? So all the living things we use and consume are obtained from natural resources. Due to increase in population or industrialization as well as urbanization, the demand of natural resources is increasing and the availability is very much limited. So there is a need for proper management of these or of those natural resources. And the proper management of natural resources consists of some points. We will see those points. Judicious use of natural resources and avoiding wastage of natural resources. It is in each and every individual hands. Then long-term planning for the use of natural resources so that it lasts not only for the present but also for future generation. So limiting your usage unnecessarily, not disturbing or using without just for fun. If you are taking a drive for 100 kilometers, so you are disturbing the same way you are exploiting some of our resources. The third one, it is the exploitation of natural resources should not be for the benefit of a few people but should be distributed equally for all. So while extracting and using the natural resources, we should also plan for the safe disposal of waste so that no damage will be caused to the environment. So next, we will see the topic forest and wildlife. So in that first, we will see the forest. What is the importance of forest and stakeholders of forest? We will see to that. So we all know why forest should be one among the natural resources to maintain equilibrium in the earth. So the forest helps to preserve the biodiversity. Biodiversity inside the forest, starting from ants or microorganisms up to the huge animals as well as plants. Forests are natural habitat of plants and animals. Forests provide timber, wood, fuel, medicines, fodder, etc. And forests help to maintain ecological balance. Earlier we have learned about the balance that need to be maintained in the nature, like food chain, food web, etc. Such an ecological balance are being maintained with the help of forest. And forest help to control the climate and rainfall. And forest help to prevent soil erosion and controls flood. And forest help to maintain the oxygen carbon dioxide balance in nature. So these are some of the importance of forest. Now we will pass on to the stakeholders of forest. So we all use various forest produce, but our dependency on forest resources it varies, and some of us have access to alternatives, some do not. When we consider the conservation of forest, we need to look at the stakeholder who are taking care of the forest. So people who are associated with forest directly or indirectly, they are the people who's living in and around the forest, who depends on forest for their livelihood, like taking wood, etc., the fallen wood, or some of the forest products. The second one, they are the industrialists who use the raw materials from the forest for manufacturing paper, medicines, furniture, etc. The third stakeholder comes the forest department of the government, who owns the forest and controls the resources from the forest. And the last one is the nature and wildlife organization, who want to conserve and preserve the forest. So we will see what each of these group needs or gets out of the forest. So the local people, they need large quantities of firewood, small timber and thatch. Bamboo is used to make slats for huts and baskets for collecting and storing food materials. They implement uh, 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 that is the implements for agriculture, fishing. These are some sites for fishing and hunting. And in addition to people gathering fruits, nuts, and medicines from the forest, their cattle also graze in forest areas or feed on other fodder which is collected from forest. So, do you think that these forest resources that we get need to be conserved? Next, we will see how forest can be conserved. So there are different methods given here. The first one is the afforestation or planting of more trees. Even though you are using the forest trees for some purposes, when you cut down those trees, plant more trees. Preventing or reducing deforestation. So maximum way, try to avoid deforesting and then prevent, or you can reduce the deforestation process. The third one is preventing overgrazing by cattle. So that too can be done. And by setting up wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, biosphere reserves, etc., in and around the like Bandipur. Those we know it is a forest area which are being set up as a wildlife sanctuary, or as a national park, or a botanical garden, etc., where we can save those, conserve those forests. And the last, it is the undertaking social forestry programs like One Mahotsav, Chipko movement for planting and protecting trees on a large scale. So here you can see the picture of Chipko movement. So here you can see some examples where the case of Bishnoi community in Rajasthan, for whom the conservation of forest and and wildlife has been a religious tenet. And the government of India has recently instituted an Amrita Devi Bishnoi National Award for Wildlife Conservation in the memory of Amrita Devi Bishnoi, who in 1731 sacrificed her life along with 363 others for the protection of Khejri trees in Khejrali village near Jodhpur in Rajasthan. So next we should pass on to the wildlife, the importance of wildlife. So wildlife helps to preserve the biodiversity, and also it helps to maintain the food chain and food web. And we get useful products from wildlife like food, medicines, leather, bones, honey, lac, etc. So same way, how we need to conserve the wildlife. Conserving the natural habitat of animals, the first way that we can naturally uh, preserve the animals. Next one is the banning of poaching of animals. The third one is protecting endangered species of animals. And the last point we should see is the setting up of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, as well as biosphere reserves, etc., need to be maintained. So, an example of people participation in the management of forest, that is in 1972, the West Bengal forest government recognized its failure in reviving the degraded sal forest in the southwestern district of the state. So the traditional method of surveillance and policing had led to a complete alienation of the people from the administration, resulting in frequent clashes between the forest officials and villagers. Forest and land related conflict in the region were also a major factor in fueling the militant peasant movement led by the Naxalites. So the department changed its strategy, making a beginning in the Arabari forest range of Midnapore district. At the instance of a far-seeing forest officer, A.K. Banerjee, villagers were involved in the protection of 1,272 hectares of badly degraded sal forest. In return for help in protection, villagers were given employment in both silviculture and harvesting operation. So the 25% of the final harvest and allowed fuel, wood, and fodder collection on payment of a nominal fee. With the active and willing participation of the local community, the sal forest of Arabari underwent a remarkable recovery. By 1983, a previously worthless forest was valued rupees 12.5 crores. Thank you.